Today's daf is daf Gimel, and we mentioned that kinuyim are explained later on in the Mishnah on daf Yud. So why is it that the Mishnah opens up with kinuyim and then goes on to yodos? The Gemara says lav dafka zimnin mefarish hahu de pasuk haresha and zimnin hahu de solik mefarish haresha. So there's no set pattern. Sometimes the Tana goes back to the first Resha to explain it. Sometimes it waits till later and explains the Sefer. Ibai same another answer. Yodos Ivy the Asyan Midrashim Mafarshlu Beresha. That although he should have explained Kinuyim first, but Kinuyim is something that's relatively straightforward in the Torah. Whereas Yodos is something that's a chidush, and since it has more of a chidush, is therefore the Tana begins to explain Yodos before Kinuyim, because Kinuyim is not such a big chidush. We'll soon see that there's machlokas about what Kinuyim is all about. This Gemara that we have now is going according to one particular opinion in Kinuyim. So the Gemara explains the Gemara asks the following question: Liftach Hadein Beresha. If you're telling me that there's a chiddush in Yodayim, and that's derived from a drasha, then why did the Mishnah open up with Yodayim? It should have opened by saying Yodos Nedarim Kinedarim, and then go on to Kinuyim. The Gemara answers Miftach Pasuk B'Kinuyim Doraisa Beresha. Since Kinuyim, as we said before, is something more Yodua, more Pashut, you don't have to have a drasha to derive it. Therefore, the Mishnah opens up with that which is more Pashut, Bahadim Mefaresh. But when it comes to interpreting and detailing the laws, then Yodos, he starts with Mefarish Yodos. He gives Kedima to Yodos, the Asyan Le Midrasha, because it's a bigger Chiddush and it's derived from Drasha. Now, this premise that Kinuyim is more Pashut, the Gemara is going to argue now, depends upon the Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish later on in Daf Yud about exactly what Kinuyim is all about. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Kinuyim are Lashon Umos, it's just another language other than Lashon Kodesh. Reish Lakish understands, on the other hand, that the Chachamim created a new language, new terminology for Nedarim, and that's called Kinuyim. The Gemara says, Hanicha, I can understand that the Mishnah begins with Kinuyim, which is more Pashut, Laman Diyam, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that Kinuyim Lashon Nachmem, meaning what difference it make if you take the Neder in Lashon Kodesh or Lashon Umos Ha'olam. Now, Laman Diyam, according to Reish Lakish, however, Lashon Shebadolem Chacham Lios Nodebo, that's a big chiddush that Rabbanan created new words that don't fit into any language, only for the purpose of taking upon oneself and enunciating a neder. That's not pashut. Is Michael Meimer? How are we going to explain why the Mishnah began with kinuyim and not with yodayim, with yodos? According to Reish Lakish, the din of yodos, which is derived from a drasha, is more pashut v'yodua. It's more simple, straightforward, and well known than the din of kinuyim, because kinuyim is a chiddush that the Chachamim will mechadish, a new language, new terminology for Nedarim. The Gemara answers, Miktani Yodos. Is it really so that the Mishnah mentions Yodos, the Lav Chisuri Mechzirei law? Haven't we already established earlier on Daf Beis Amid Beis that there's a Chisuri Mechzer, there's a piece in the Mishnah that's missing? And therefore, just like we said that Yad Nedarim L'Nedarim is to be added to the Mishnah, then let's open up the Mishnah with the din of Yadayim, Aktiv Nami Yitni Yados. So we should learn the Mishnah in a way, or formulate the Mishnah in a way that the Mishnah, the Tana, opens up with the din of Yadayim, because that's the Chiddush. And we're going to read the Mishnah in the following way. Kol Yodos Nedarim Nedarim. I mean to say that Yadayim is less of a Kiddush than Kinuyim, I meant to say. It's more straightforward. And then after mentioning that Yadayim Nedarim Nedarim, then go on Kol Kinuyim Nedarim Nedarim to teach us the law of Kinuyim, which is a bigger Kiddush according to the Shita Reish Lakish. The Elei Yodos. Now the Mishnah goes back to explain the ratio. What are the Yadayim? Ha'omel Chavero, etc. That's a Yad. Elei Kinuyim later on in the Mishnah, which is printed here on Daf Yud. Konom, Konoch, Konos. These are the Kinuyim, which, according to Reish Lakish, the Chachamim created this new language. They were Kovea these Kinuyim for the purpose of Nedarim. So basically, the Mishnah now has that Seder, opens up with Yadayim, mentions Kinuyim, and then goes back to explain Yadayim. Now the Gemara asks the following question. We mentioned that the din of Yadayim and Nedarim is derived from a Josh. Yadayim, Yodos Heichen Ksiv. Where is the pasuk from which the Chacham darshan and derived the din of Yadayim, that a neder is chal b'loshen yad? Even though it's true that elsewhere in Shas the Gemara has dinim of Yadayim, like for example Kiddushin, Yesh Yad Kiddushin, and the Gemara doesn't seek a source in the Torah drasha to derive the din of Yadayim. But here in Nedarim, where we have a special halacha of Gomar Belibo Sarach Lahotzi Bisvasav, Nedarim is Haflas Peh. It's not enough that he thinks or people understand that he wants to take upon himself an neder. You need a Lashon Neder. That's called Haflas Nedarim. And for that, I need a source to assume and upgrade Yadayim to a level of Ad Sheyotzi Bisvasav, that it is an actual formulation. In Kedushin, it's just, do I understand what he means? Does she understand what he has in mind? That's enough to communicate. But here in Nedarim, it's not enough to communicate that which he has in his heart and in his mind, his will, but rather you need Haflas for everything inheres in the language. So to upgrade Yadayim to a language of Neder, when the Yadayim is an incomplete language, for that we need a drush. And the Gemara answers, Ish ki yafli lindar neder nazil lahazil Hashem. Vesanya, and we learned in a Brisa why the double language nazir lahazir, very strange language. It doesn't even say lahazir nazir, which would have meant more sense, but nazir lahazir. Lasos, and here we have a girsa issue. The Ran has the girsa of lasos yodos nazirus kinazirus. So this extra pasuk with the kefal lashon of nazir lahazir is teaching me the halach of Yadayim in Nazirus, and Yodos Nazirus Kinazirus. So if a person accepts upon himself Nazirus in the Lashon Yad, an incomplete language, the Nazirus is Chal. Ainly the Brisa continues, Ela ben Nazirus, the Nedarim B'nayin. How do we know that in the Neder, where we don't have this language of Nazir Lahazir, nevertheless, the law is that Yad Neder is valid. It's a binding Neder. Talmud Lomar Ish Ki Yafli Lindor Neder Nazil Hazil Hashem is a hekish in the pasuk between Nedarim and Nazirus. Makish Nazirus with Nedarim and Nedarim Nazirus, the two-way street. We're going to derive Nedarim from Nazirus, and we're going to derive Nazirus from Nedarim. In what sense? Towards what din do we derive Nedarim from Nazirus? For the halacha of Yadayim. My Nazirus, Asabo Yados, Nazirus ki Nazirus, you can be makabel on yourself, Nazirus Beloshin Yadayim, Af, Nedarim, Asabo Yados, Nedarim ki Nedarim, and an incomplete language of Neder is also valid and binding as a Neder. Uma Nedarim, and what do we derive in the opposite direction? Nazirus derived from Nedarim, Ma Nedarim over B'Val Yachil. The Torah says, Ish ki yidor neder l'yachil dvaros, a lav of B'Val Yachil. And if he takes a neder to bring a carbon and he delays bringing the carbon for 3 regolim, he violates the Isur Bal Tiacher, as the Torah says in Dvarim called Gimel, Kisidor Nedel Hashem Lokech Losa Achel Shalmo, Af Nazirus over Bebal Yachel Ubebal Tiacher. And the Gemara later on is going to try to analyze when do you have a new Isur of Bal Yachel and Nazirus. L'chor Nazirus has its own Isur, its own Lavin. So what does it mean that in Neder you have Bal Yachel, therefore in Nazirus you also have Bal Yachel? You already have the Isurim. The Torah has already mentioned the Isurim of Tiglachas and Tumah, and also Bal Tiacher. How could you imagine a Bal Tiacher in Nazirus? As soon as he's makabel on himself to be a Nazir, he's a Nazir. There's no delay over here. And yet the Brisa goes on and derives other conclusions about Nazirus from this Hekesh to Nedarim. Nedarim of Mefer Nidre Bito, the Torah gave and vested in the father, as long as his daughter is a Kana, he has the authority to be Mefer HaNedarim, as the pasuk tells us in Bamidbar Lamed in Hani Avia Osa V'Yom Shamo Kol Nedarev Asara Shorasa Al Nafshel Yakum. In Parashas Matos, the Torah specifically invests in the father the power to be Mefer his daughter's Nedarim, Ubal Mefer Nidre Ishto, and a married woman, if she takes a Neder of Inu Nefesh, then the Torah has authorized the husband and Yofer Osam Isha, Yom Shamo Komotzu Sel Nedarim Lisa Nafshel Yakum. Is af benazirus ha'ov mefer nazirus pito ubal mefer naziras ishto. So now we ask the following question: why do you tell me that the language nazir lahazir is a kefal lashon from which we derive the law of yodayim? Ma'ishna gabi nazirus d'chsiv nazir lahazir. We find a similar kefal lashon with regard to nedarim. Nedarim not miksiv lindar neder, and there seems to be a superfluous repetition here, redundancy, lindar neder, and that should allow us to derive the conclusion of yadayim in nedarim from the parsha nedarim itself. I don't have to stretch my arm out to the hekesh and derive it from the zirus. Hekesh alone. And the Gemara answers, iksiv neder lindar. You would be right if the Torah put the noun before the verb in a very unusual sequence. K'niksiv, as we saw this on an unusual sequence in Nazir Lahazir, where first you have the noun describing the person as a Nazir, and then Lahazir, when the verb should come first and then the noun. Then your question would be a binding, valid question, because then I'd want to know, why don't I derive Yadayim and Nedarim from Lindar Ned? But it doesn't say in the pasuk neder ladur lindar, but rather it says lindar neder. And had it said neder lindar, like nazir lahazir, then lo tzarich hakesh, I wouldn't need hakesh. But hashta, now that it says nechsiv lindar neder, that's the natural way. That's divrei Torah b'lashon b'nei adam. That's the way we express ourselves. Lindar neder, to actively take a neder. So there's the verb and then the totzah. The result of that verb is a neder. So in the terms of lindar neder, we don't have a kfelus which would justify a drasha from which we derive the din of yadayim and nedarim. We must stretch our arm out to the hekesh to nazirus, and that's if we operate with the principle of divrei Torah kil lashon b'nei adam. So Gemara says, on Nicha, that works out, Raman Islay, the one who adopted the principle of Divrei Torah Kolosha B'nei Adam, El Laman Yomar, but according to the opinion of Leslie Divrei Torah Kolosha B'nei Adam, the Torah, any kfelus, even if it's a kfelus that normally people would use in their colloquial language, is still a kfelus and is worthy of a drasha. We derive halachas from it. And therefore, again, hi lindar neder, my obviously, what are you going to derive from lindar neder, which now is a redundancy, a kefal lashon from which we have to derive something? and you're not going to derive the din of Yadayim because that you derive through the Hekesh to the Zirus. So what Rasha are you going to derive from Lindor Neder, according to the Yomi who holds Lo Dibra Torah V'Loshem Nedarim? The Gemara answers, Darish Le Lasos Yados Nedarim Kinedarim. So now the Gemara comes back and says, you know what? From the double language of Lindor Neder, according to the Man Yomi who rejects Dibra Torah V'Loshem Nedarim, we're going to in fact derive Yados Nedarim Kinedarim. Okay, so then we really don't need the Hekesh to Nazirus to derive Yodos Nedarim Kinedarim. Umakish Nazirus Nedarim, and the halacha of Yadayim in Nazirus is going to be derived from Nedarim. And now we're going to have to ask ourselves the question: what are you going to do with the pasuk Nazir Lahazir? So Lindar Neder, you derive the din of Yadayim according to this Madiyoma, and to the via the Hekesh, you derive that Yodos of Nazirus Kinazirus. So now what do we do with Nazir Lahazir? Our answer is Dorish Le Melamed. It's going to teach us